Hello and welcome back to our Verse tutorial series, where we're going through Epic's brand new programming language inside the Unreal Editor for Fortnite. In the first episode, we went through the basics of getting started with Verse and looking at a Hello World sort of application. And we went through some explanations of what variables are and what functions do and how we define them inside of Verse. Well, in this episode, we're going to go through the process of making an object refer to editable objects inside of our scene. So, for example, we're going to make a button interact with a spawner to spawn an item when we push a button. We're going to go through that, and we're also going to explain how to find out this information, how to get better and learn Verse. So, let's get started and look at Verse. So, welcome back to our Verse starter project. Last time we went through the basics of Verse, and in this episode, we're going to show you how to link objects inside the world to your Verse code. So let's do a very simple setup of having a button push and spawn an object in our scene. So what we're going to do is first we'll create a brand new Verse object. So we're going to go up top to Verse options here and go to Verse Explorer and go to my content, right click, create new Verse file. And we're just going to name this thing spawn object device. And we'll click create. That's going to create the file. I'm going to see it down here. Now you won't see it down here probably, and that's because this has to be built first. So once you've added any folders, any code here, or done anything to code, you want to rebuild it. Just go to Verse, build Verse code, and that will now appear at the bottom here. But let's open this up in our Verse code. Okay, and there it is. So here we have a very basic class setup, as you've seen before. We did it last time. So what we can do is get rid of our print going on over here. And as you can see, we're going to get a little error mark here. And that's simply just saying because we've got no code afterwards, it feels like it's kind of wasted, which is true. It is. But that's fine. We're not worried about that just yet. So the first thing we're going to do is going to make editable options for our class here. So above begin and underneath the spawn object class definition here, we're going to add something called an editable. So you add this at editable. And at the bottom here is where we define our editable variables that we can do inside of the editor. So we first of all name it. So I'm going to do button. And I'm going to go and set that to the class of button device. And it's going to ask for a button device. Okay, and so we've got a a variable called button. It's a type of a variable called a button device, and it's just referring to this button device logic here. So I'm going to do another editable, and it's going to be spawner, and put the colon there, and we'll do spawner item spawner device equals spawner item spawner device, and put the colons there afterwards to initiate that it's a brand new object. Okay, so we're creating these two references to these two objects inside our scene. Now, to see this actually working, I'm going to just demonstrate to you. I'm just going to put in a print in here so it doesn't give us an error. We'll go in here, test. Okay, brilliant. Right, we're happy with that. We can now go back to our editor and we can do Verse, build Verse code. And we're getting some errors. Oh, probably because these are meant to be curly brackets, not those brackets. Sorry. So yeah, the curly brackets are for functions. These are for new classes, so they initiate that they're constructors basically. So that's what that is. So yeah, try that again. Go back into our thing here. Verse, build Verse code. And that looks like it's all good. Excellent. So let's drag that into our scene now. Go spawn object device here, and there you go. And you can see here, because I made those things editable, you can see the options down here. It's a button and a spawner. And I can choose from the drop down objects that I can fit inside of here. Now, I defined it as being a button device only, so therefore only accept button devices. Likewise, the spawner here will only accept spawner objects. So let's add a couple of those to our scene here. So we go into our Fortnite folder, devices, and I'm going to search for these. So button, device, and there it is. We drag this out into our scene here. Let's raise up a little bit. There we are. And I'm going to grab an item spawner. And there it is. I'll drag that into our scene there. So I'm going to link these to my code here, this first code here. I can go to button here. I can choose it from the drop down, or I can also use the eyedropper tool here to click, and I can click on the spawner to select it. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so that's how we are linking and creating editable versions of this code here. So let's go back through our code and see what's actually happening here. Let's go to our first code here. So if you want a variable, because this is what these are, variables, to be editable inside of the editor, you need to give it this tag before it happens. You can also do other ways like an editable class, things like that, but this is the simplest setup here. I'm going to show you. So for example, I could do other things in here. I could do that editable, and we do my value colon int equals 10. Okay, and that sets up default value of int to be equal to 10 on my value. And if I go into my build verse code here, you'll see my value is now there with a default value of 10. Okay, so the reason why you don't want to put stuff down here is so it saves you making a bunch of classes to account for all circumstances. So in here, I would set up a list once to work with any button, any spawner, and I could drag in more of these to react to different buttons, different spawners to create different effects. So for example, here we're going to make it so that this button here triggers the item spawner. So first of all, let's make the item spawner configure this to actually spawn something. So I'm going to click on the item spawner here, and I'm going to turn off spawn item on timer. I'm going to turn off respawn item on timer. I'm going to go to item list, and this is where I can set up what item I want it to spawn in. So let's go in here and just choose which pickup I want to do. So we'll just do, I don't know, alien nanites. Sure, why not? So we've got that going in there. Okay, and give us one of those, and that's all good. But it's not going to do it at all. So we've turned it all off. It won't trigger anything like that. We're going to make this button do the triggering for us. And we're going to hook up that in the code. So let's go through and talk that out. So in begin play, we're going to make something called a subscription. We're going to subscribe our spawner to the button push. So to do this, though, we have to actually create a function to do this. So we're going to create a new function. Important when you're doing a new function that you take the indent in, so it goes to a new code block. Otherwise, it's going to assume that this is belonging to the on begin, which it doesn't. So here we're going to do on interacted with, and we'll leave it like that, so it's not got anything parameter wise going inside of it. And we'll give it a colon. Let's give return void, and we'll make it equal. Oh, it does this sometimes. This is one thing I really find annoying with this, is if your mouse is hovering over anything, it will think you're selecting it when I'm not. It's really annoying. There we go. So then to actually spawn the item in, we take our spawner reference, which we've got there, do a dot, a full stop, and we'll do spawn item. And yeah, we'll leave it as the parentheses like this, because it's a function telling it to spawn its item. Okay. Now that's just going to tell it to spawn whatever it is in it. We need to actually bind this thing to an event, and that event's interacting with our button. So we need to do something to our button. So we go button dot. So we know it's to do our button. And if you can look, it gives you some suggestions of what you want to do here. And we've got this interacted with event. So I'm going to choose this one. And we are now going to subscribe to it. So this event we can subscribe to, which make a binding, do full stop, subscribe. And in brackets, you determine what it's going to do when it triggers the event. So when that event's been triggered, we're going to trigger on interacted with. So just type in on interacted with. And there we go. Now we're going to give it an error. If you hover over it, it tells you what the error is. This function parameter expects a value of the type agent to void. But this argument is incompatible value of type tuple to void. So the issue is that our interactive with here, it's expecting to pass through who is interacting with it, like which player is interacting with this and subscribing to this. So we need to know who's been subscribed to it. So in this case, we're going to subscribe it to the player. So go in player, which is how you reference the player, and we get their agent, which refers to the actual character walking around in the scene. And it goes like that. So we can go this print string now. And there we go. So we are subscribing our buttons interacted with event to this function here. So then going to call this event, which is going to spawn the item. So it's a very simple setup here, but that's all we need to do. So let's go back to our thing, build our verse code, and let's test it out. So here we are in our level. And you can see our devices there. There's our button and there's our spawner. Now the button, go up to it, push E, and there's our goop. Which we can pick up. Push it again. And it triggers it again. Very as simple as that. And as you can see, this is the actual code, just physically represented, but it doesn't have to be here. You can take it out if you want. To show you that, if I just end this game and go back to our editor, we can just go up to our computer screen here, and I can go up to its static mesh component and change the static mesh to nothing. And just drag on this and go clear. And now it has nothing on it. So it's not an issue whatsoever if you want to hide your logic. You can totally do that. And you can see if I go back to the other screen, if you go back to your screen in the game here, you'll see that it's gone, but the occlusion is still there. And you can see there, if you notice in the top left-hand corner, push changes to make refresh. So what I have to do is go back to my editor. Whenever you're dealing with the editor, you have to make sure that when you're happy to push it, just click push changes. And that'll push it to the source control, which will then update on everyone's screen as well. And you see sessions updating. And when that's finished updating, and it'll say on other people's screens as well that it's updating, uploading, whatever it is. And when it's finished, we can check out the changes in the game. And we should be all good. Okay. And there you go. It's now gone. But our function will still work. So you can think of some interesting gameplay mechanics with this, such as like just this setup alone, such as making the players have to hit a button first in order to spawn in an object for them to collect points on, or wherever. But it's really quite cool and easy to do. But you may be wondering, like, how the hell do you figure this stuff out? Where do you even begin to figure this stuff out without following videos like this? Well, let's go through the verse code and explain a few things. If you're new to program completely, there's lots of things in here that are going to confuse you probably. But you have to remember the basic core rule of this is that you have classes, these objects, these things that exist in this code and exist in this world have both variables and functions. And what we're doing is, most of the time, we're just referring to their variables and functions as part of other variables and functions. So, for example, as you can see here, we're getting a button variable. So this is how we're defining a variable. Remember from the last video, we define the name of the variable, which is button in this case, or we call it whatever we want. But then this is the type of variable it is. Now, we looked at ints, floats, so forth, but this type is a reference to another button device, and that's what they call it, a button device. Now, if you want to know what these are all called, because it's not quite clear what they're called, you want to refer to the API reference material. And the reference material is, there's quite a few things in here, but it's not the most comprehensive one. But yeah, it's not too bad. But if you click on here, you can see the different things you have modules list. So this is what we see at the top saying using. It's using these things. So in this case, it's using devices from Fortnite, which is this one. And it'll load up. There we are. And this will give you a list of all the devices that you could possibly have. Now, it's a lot to go through. Surely this must be an easier way. Well, there is. If you go back to the editor and go to your content drawer, then they're named after these. So if you just put in item spawner underscore device, that'll give you what you want, such as ball spawner device, capture item device, cannon spawner device. That's the how they've labeled things, make it really easy for you to find what you want. So it's super quick and easy to just find out what you want by just going into here and just seeing what devices you have available to you. And these are all devices they provide for you in their Fortnite folder. And all they do is like different gameplay mechanics, things like that, that you can freely use. But here, yeah, Accolade device, boat spawner device, same thing everywhere. So our button, for example, is a button underscore device. So that's how you find those elements out for your verse. Okay. Now, once you've got that type, when we create a new reference, we have to say, okay, we want it to be just a blank reference to button device because we don't know what device the user's going to want to tie it to. So we can't give it a specific reference. So what we do is we just say, create a new empty reference, which is what this is doing. Yeah, it's creating a brand new class reference to button device. It doesn't do anything. Okay. And the same goes down to spawner right here. We're just changing and setting it to an item spawner device instead. And the editable tags are just here to define attributes. There's a few couple of other attributes as well. Editable allows you to say edit it in the device settings there, but again you can find more information about what attributes there are on the API reference. So let's take a look at that and show you that. So back on here, we go to the verse language reference section, and down here you'll find specifiers and attributes. And this gives you all the information to know about class specifiers and attributes. Now you don't need to know all of them off by hand. It doesn't really help seeing it like this. I feel it's kind of wasteful, because it's easier to learn it when you see it in context. So that's what we're hoping to do with the videos, is describe how all these work in context. But yeah, if you go down the way bottom here, you'll see attributes section, and you can see editable is one of the options here. Yeah. And here you can also give a documentation on it, which you can then write out a description of what the hell it is that you're trying to do here. So yeah, really cool. Okay, it's just all here for you. So that's what you'll find is that a lot of this stuff is here. It's just a lot of out of context. So it makes it a bit hard to understand how it can be used. But as I say, that's what we're hoping to try and show you inside these videos as well. So yeah, that's how we're defining those values there. And it's like it's part of the class in general, so it's not part of any function or events or anything like that. It's part of the class in general. That's why it's outside of begin, interacted with, but it's still inside the class itself. Okay, so that is that section explained there. The on begin one comes with the thing when you create a new file. The override and suspends here are two different specifiers that we literally just saw. Over here, we've got specifiers, and if I go up, you'll see got a few on here. Suspends there, so it indicates the function is asynchronous, creates an async context for the body of the function, which basically means it doesn't wait for the function to finish, it just keeps on going and just fires it off. Which if you've done Unreal Engine 5 programming, that's how events work, is they're asynchronous. And then yeah, we've got up here, whichever one type it was, override. Did I describe override in here? I don't know if I can't remember if they actually do or not. But override essentially is just it overrides the parent class begin function, so it overrides it completely. Doesn't actually use it. Yeah, don't look like they've explained that one in here. I don't think, but no, they haven't. But that's what it means. So when you're using the dot signifier here, it's much like how you do like an address. Okay, so the button is the reference to the button, which we've defined up here. We want to get this particular event from it. Okay, interact with event. This gets fired off by the button when it gets interacted with. That's how its default behavior works. And again, if you want to know what the button has on it, one way you can do this is do button dot, and you can see a lot of the list of things that you can do. So here we've got some functions: disable it, enable it, get how long it is, interaction time, get its max trigger count. There's the events you can bind with. On begin is there for it. On interactive with, these are what we have here too. Like you can do stuff there. So there's on interactive with that we are expecting usually with that. Spawner is part of my one. Yeah, so you're gonna see all the things that this could call. Okay, so I like put interactive with event. Okay, and now I could do things with that event. There's an event binding it has. We'll one day go through how to create your own event bindings, but for now we'll just use the ones that are in there. But here you can now do describe again. Do a full stop in here to see what you have available to you, option wise. And so in here, it'll give you some suggestions. I don't know if it's going to give us subscribe though. That's annoying. Okay, so we have to do type it in. You'll see. It's keyword. Okay, it won't come up if it's keyword, and it'll come up here. So subscription stuff, I think, is on the documentation. Let me have a look. I don't see the binding stuff in here. But if you've used Unreal Engine 5, it's basically like an event dispatcher. That's what that is. Let's see where they might have put it. But if we go to the verse glossary, we can see if we go to S, go to subscribe, and you'll see a full description of it somewhere. Where is it? Subscribe. Subscribing is the way to specify the function you want to call when an event is raised. This is referred to as binding to an event. The bound function is referred to as a handler. Okay, so the handler is this bit here, the bit in the brackets. And that means it's going to call this thing afterwards. Okay. Yeah, and the interactive with here is sending out a signature of who is interacting with it, and it just, as we showed you during the coding of that, if it gives you an error, it's easy to see the error and then it tell you what it needs, and then you go, okay, it needs an agent. Agent basically even refers to a different character in the game, and you can, a way to get the player one is just in player. If you get the AI, that's a different way of doing that and so forth, but in player will get you who is interacting with that. So hopefully this helps you out, but obviously a lot more to come. And there you go. There is our look at Verse and how we make editable options and how we can tie those together, and also hopefully explain a little bit of how you can start learning Verse on your own as well. Now, there's lots still to cover within Verse, especially if you're new to programming. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel, and if you want to see more videos early before anyone else, head over to patreon.com/Ryan Laley, where a donation of just $1 gets you access to not just the UEFN, sorry, UEFN tutorial videos, but also all the UE5 videos as well. So if you want to learn more about Unreal Engine 5 entirely, then you can go there too and learn a lot more too. Thank you so much to all the patrons and YouTube members for their support. And if you like this video, make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye everyone.